The Vraxil Dominion called it cleansing. Humans called it murder. Orbiting Thalassa Prime, the Dominion fleet drifted like a swarm of obsidian blades. The planet below shimmered with white seas, beautiful, deadly salt water that could strip metal to bone in hours. It had been humanity's most ambitious oceanic colony, a defiant claim in alien territory. Now it burned. Commander Lyra Vance stood inside the fractured remains of Outpost Meridian, her pressure suit streaked with salt and soot. Through the cracked viewport, she watched the skies rain fire. The Vraxil bombardment was methodical, almost elegant, each plasma lance descending in sequence, like a heartbeat. The heartbeat of extermination. Civilian districts are gone, Corporal Jane reported, voice trembling through the calm. They didn't even warn us. The ceasefire beacons still broadcasting. Lyra's jaw tightened. Keep it on. Let the galaxy see what peace looks like under Vraxil command. A tremor rippled through the base. Part of the western wall disintegrated, sucking and choking white mist from the corrosive sea. The salt water hissed as it touched metal. It wasn't water, it was acid's cruel cousin. The colonists had spent decades taming it, adapting technology to survive its toxicity. Now that very sea was swallowing them whole. The Dominion called it justice for humanity's unauthorized expansion. Lyra called it cowardice. Above the chaos, the alien mothership, the Dominion's pride, hung like a black moon. Reports said its commander, High Strategos Kareth, personally oversaw the annihilation. The Vraxil were methodical conquerors. They erased civilizations not for need, but for demonstration. Lyra keyed the encrypted channel. This is Commander Lyra Vance, Outpost Meridian. To any surviving human forces, do not surrender. They don't want prisoners. Static answered her. Then, faintly, a child's voice. Mommy said the stars are falling. Lyra froze. The channel died. Her throat tightened, but the tears never came. There wasn't time for grief. Commander! Jane pointed at the horizon. They're landing drones, scavengers. She saw them, sleek obsidian constructs descending on gravity tethers, harvesting survivors like carrion birds. Some drones dragged bodies. Others sprayed a compound that melted through shelters, forcing the living into the open. Lyra turned to her team. Only 14 soldiers left. Half wounded. We hold the base until the evac pods are ready. If they reach the command core, everything we built here dies for nothing. Evac pods won't survive the salt storm, Jane warned. The water's turned volatile since the strikes. Then we go through it, Lyra said. If humans could build a city here, we can damn well escape one. He stared. Through the corrosive ocean? Would you rather wait for them to dissect us? No one argued. Humanity had never won by playing safe. On board the Dominion's pride, High Strategos Kareth watched the extermination unfold on holographic displays. His scaled hand tapped a rhythmic pattern against the armrest of his command throne. Observe them, Subcommander. Even now, they cling to life. Fascinating, isn't it? They die screaming, yet they die facing the sky. His aide bowed. Permission to deploy ground troops, Strategos? A swift execution would prevent further resistance. Karetha's golden eyes gleamed. No, let them fight. Fear spreads better when it's earned. He turned the display to focus on Outpost Meridian. A handful of heat signatures clustered near the shore. Lyra's unit. Magnify. I want to see what courage looks like when hope is gone. At the shore, the ocean frothed with chemical fury. The air burned with salt vapor, eating through exposed plates of armor. Lyra's team worked fast, patching together a submersible from damaged cargo modules. Jane coughed, pulling his glove free to reveal skin blistered by exposure. Commander, this isn't survival, it's suicide. Lyra sealed the hatch. Suicide is waiting for them to find us. Survival means diving. The sea roared like a living thing. Waves crashed against the metallic rocks, their foam sizzling into steam. Every survival instinct screamed, don't. Every human instinct said, try anyway. She looked at the sky one last time, where alien ships glowed like executioner torches, and keyed her helmet calm. To anyone listening, remember Thalassa. Remember what they did here. When we return, it won't be as victims. With that, she stepped into the salt water. The liquid hissed against her suit, eating at the outer layers, but the internal cooling system held. One by one, her squad followed. The water burned white around them, boiling as the storm intensified. Kareth watched in disbelief. They're entering the ocean? That water is lethal. His aide hesitated. Perhaps they prefer death to capture, strategos. No, Kareth said slowly, narrowing his reptilian eyes. They think they can survive it. He leaned forward. Record this. The council will want proof of their madness. Under the waves, Lyra's visor glowed dim blue. The world was an alien hellscape. White dunes of crystallized salt, skeletal remains of ocean rigs, glowing fissures venting steam from the planet's molten core. Navigation was impossible. Communications barely held. Commander, Jane's voice crackled. Hull temperature rising, pressure suits degrading. Keep moving east, Lyra replied. The old mining tunnels lead to the thermal vents. We can use the heat signature to mask from scans. How do you even know that'll work? I don't, she said simply. But humans didn't cross galaxies by knowing. We did it by trying. Through the opaque currents, lights appeared, bioluminescent creatures, the only natives to survive Thalassa's acid depths. Their tendrils drifted like silk, unaffected by the poison. One brushed Lyra's arm, leaving trails of glowing residue on her suit. Jane whispered, awed despite himself. Beautiful. Keep recording, Lyra ordered. Even if we die, someone needs to see this. Above, the Vraxil analysts studied the footage. Their suits can't endure that environment for more than minutes, one reported. They'll dissolve. Karetha's tail lashed once, slow and deliberate. Perhaps. Or perhaps they'll do what humans always do, endure longer than they should. He sat back, unease creeping beneath his scales. Prepare the broadcast. The galaxy will watch the species extinguish itself. Hours later, Lyra's signal vanished beneath the ocean's interference. But deep under the corrosive waves, power signatures flickered. Human machinery. Ancient mining drones reactivated by unknown commands. The impossible was happening. Lyra coughed, voice raw but steady. If they think the ocean kills us, let's make sure it does the opposite. Jane blinked through his visor. You're not saying. I am, she said. We turn the vents into a forge. Melt their landing craft from below. Her lips curved into a grim smile. Let them watch. Above, the alien fleet began losing contact with their ground units. The sea itself boiled, not naturally, but with controlled detonations. Heat blooms lit up their sensors like wildfire. Kareth rose from his throne. Impossible. They were dead. His aide stammered. Strategos, the humans, something's moving beneath the ocean. Karetha's eyes narrowed. Then the cleansing has failed. Lyra's final transmission pierced the static across the void. You called our world a death trap. You were right, but you forgot who builds homes in hell. The Dominion believed Thalassa Prime dead. But death, to humanity, had always been optional. Beneath the molten ocean, Commander Lyra Vance and 20 survivors worked among the ruins of a mining complex carved into volcanic rock. Every surface hissed with heat. Every breath tasted of metal and acid. Yet they built. Humans always built. Lyra watched the holographic map flicker above a cracked console. Red dots marked the Dominion's fleet orbiting overhead. They're regrouping, she murmured. They think we drowned. Corporal Jane, his armor scarred beyond repair, wiped grime from his faceplate. Wouldn't blame them. We should have drowned. Lyra allowed a faint smile. Then let's use that mistake. She zoomed in on a network of tunnels, branching from their position. Old fusion mining shafts. Still connected to the ocean vents. We can trigger chain detonations from below and rupture the seabed under their landing craft. Jane frowned. We'll die before we see the surface. Maybe, she said, but they'll learn what it costs to bury us. Above, on the Dominion flagship pride of Vraxil, High Strategos Kareth studied the planet's scorched surface. His golden eyes glinted like molten coins. No remaining life signs. The purge is complete. His aide bowed. The council will commend your efficiency, Strategos. Caretha's clawed fingers drummed against the armrest. Efficiency is meaningless if they return. The humans breed defiance like a disease. Leave satellites in orbit, monitor for anomalies. I want absolute confirmation of extinction. Yes, strategos. Kareth turned away, but something gnawed at him, an unease he refused to name. The humans had a habit of surviving what logic deemed impossible. The silence below was too quiet, too clean. The silence broke. Lyra crouched beside a rusted reactor core. Power output. Jane scanned the readings. Barely stable. But it'll hold if we reroute through the mining drones. That's all we need. She typed in manual overrides, watching sparks jump across the panel. The old machines groaned awake. Drones that had once dug for minerals now pulsed with weaponized energy. Their fusion drives hummed like ancient beasts ready to roar. One of the technicians hesitated. Commander, if we overload this much pressure... I know, Lyra interrupted. We won't get a second chance. They worked in silence, each movement precise, desperate, purposeful. These weren't soldiers anymore. They were engineers of vengeance. Human survival had never been elegant. It was invention born of fury. Jane adjusted a power conduit. You really think this will hurt them? Lyra's tone hardened. No, it'll remind them why we're feared. Hours passed. The tunnels vibrated with restrained energy. On the upper levels, corrosive water seeped through fractures, mixing with plasma exhaust. The entire underworld felt alive, angry. Lyra activated her comm. All units, prepare to detonate on my mark. Jane, set transmitters to mimic natural seismic data. They'll think it's tectonic instability. Jane exhaled. You're making Thalassa fight back. She met his gaze. It's her planet, too. He smiled despite the fear. You're insane, Commander. Good. Maybe that's what it takes to scare gods. In orbit, Caretha's officers noticed first. Strategos, one called. Unusual magnetic readings from the ocean bed. Increasing rapidly. Caretha's brow furrowed. Explain. Could be geothermal, another offered. Or, the ocean erupted. A pillar of blue-white plasma tore upward, breaching the atmosphere. It split into smaller explosions across the hemisphere, each precise, timed, controlled. The fleet shuddered as shockwaves buffeted their shields. Alarm screamed. Sensors failed. Kareth rose. What is this? The holoscreen flared, Lyra's face, scarred and calm, flickering through static. This is Commander Lyra Vance, Thalassa Colony. You came to erase us. You forgot. We build in the places you fear to breathe. Then the feed vanished. Moments later, half the Dominion's landing flotilla disappeared beneath boiling clouds. The ocean became a field of molten glass. Caretha's aide stumbled. She's alive. Caretha's claws clenched. Alive or dead. She's still teaching me how little we understand them. Deep below, Lyra's crew braced against the shockwaves. The tunnels collapsed behind them, sealing exits, but their crawler, a reinforced mining transport, survived. Steam flooded the chamber as systems screamed under pressure. Jane checked the status monitor. Primary vents destroyed. Energy surge confirmed. Their fleet's in disarray. Lyra nodded, wiping blood from her lip. Send a signal. Transmit everything through the orbital buoy. He hesitated. It'll expose our position. They already know we're here. Let them see what survival looks like. The buoy launched through the ocean, shielded by the vapor storm. Once free, it fired the transmission into space, a live feed of Dominion ships falling from orbit. On the Pride of Vraxil, the bridge lights flickered. Reports poured in, fuel ruptures, plasma detonations, ship losses. Kareth stood motionless, watching his empire's precision unravel. They weaponized the planet. His aide whispered, "Turn the core against us." Caretha's voice was low, seething. They turned death itself into strategy. He stared out at the burning clouds, and for the first time in his long, victorious career, he felt a chill of uncertainty. Pull the fleet back. I won't lose more ships to ghosts. But strategos. Do it. The fleet began retreat maneuvers, engines sputtering through the acidic atmosphere. Below, Thalassa burned brighter, as if alive. Inside the crawler, Lyra felt the rumble of their withdrawal. She looked up, watching faint shadows of retreating ships through the turbulent water. Jane whispered, disbelief in his tone. "They're leaving." Lyra didn't answer immediately. Her eyes followed the rising debris trails. "No," she said finally. "They're regrouping. But now they know we're not prey." He smiled faintly. "So what now?" She tightened her gloves around the controls. "Now we rebuild and prepare for the next war." The crawler's lights dimmed as it drifted deeper into the molten dark. Around them, the planet hissed and boiled, reshaping itself in the wake of human defiance. Kareth stood alone in his darkened command chamber, watching the feed loop of Lyra's message. Her final words echoed through the static. "We build in the places you fear to breathe." He played it again and again, each repetition carved deeper into his thoughts. "Madness," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "No species could." He stopped himself. Could, he realized, was never the right word for humans. They would. Always. Kareth looked once more toward the cursed world below. Its glow filled the viewport like a vengeful star. "Let them have their victory," he whispered. "It will only make their extinction more instructive." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure he believed himself. Far below, in the churning abyss of Thalassa, humanity stirred, bloody, broken, and unbowed. And for the first time in recorded Dominion history, an alien empire retreated not from strength, but from fear. Silence reigned over Thalassa Prime for 17 days. Then humanity answered that silence with war. The Dominion had withdrawn to regroup, expecting ruin below. Instead, their sensors caught something impossible: organized transmissions from the planet's molten depths, encrypted in pre-Dominion binary. Human. Coordinated. Alive. From the flagship pride of Vraxil, High Strategos Kareth stared at the data feed. They have no fleet, no factories, no support worlds. Where do they find the strength to persist? His aide, trembling under the Strategos' glare, replied, "We've underestimated them before, sir." Kareth's scaled hand slammed against the console. "Not again. Prepare orbital recon. I want eyes on every continent." But before the drones could deploy, half their transmission relays went dark. Beneath the surface, Commander Lyra Vance stood in a new chamber, once a geothermal facility, now transformed into a foundry of vengeance. The survivors had repurposed molten conduits into fusion forges, feeding off the planet's furious heart. Drones hummed overhead, fabricating alloy shells and hull plating from scavenged alien wreckage. Jane watched sparks dance across the molten pool. "You realize what this means, Commander? We're building warships in a place the Dominion called uninhabitable." Lyra didn't look away from the glowing forge. "Exactly. They think nature protects them from us. But nature's just another battlefield." A technician nearby announced, "Core reactor synchronized. Power output stable. Prototype hull plating ready for stress test." "Do it," Lyra said. The drone lifted a molten slab, cooled it instantly with seawater, and dropped it into place. The impact shook the tunnel, but the plating held. Human metallurgy, fused with alien shielding. Imperfect, ugly, but indestructible. Jane exhaled. "We just made armor that survives acid and plasma both." Lyra smiled faintly. "Then we just changed the war." Kareth watched the growing interference in Thalassa's orbit. "We're losing signal integrity," an officer reported. "The ocean's ion storms have increased by 40%. Natural causes unknown." Kareth's golden eyes narrowed. Nothing on that world is natural anymore. The bridge darkened as static filled the screens. Then a signal broke through. Human origin. The translation AI hesitated before rendering the voice. "This is Thalassa Colony. Dominion interference detected. Stand by for return fire." "Return what?" Kareth hissed. "They have nothing left." Then the oceans exploded upward. Thousands of plasma plumes erupted, but they weren't random this time. The detonations aligned into a pattern, a massive, coded formation. Hidden within the chaos, stealth pods launched from beneath the surface, cloaked by electromagnetic storms. Each one carried stolen Dominion tech, reconfigured into a weapon humans barely understood. Karatha's aide gasped. Impact signatures incoming. They're beneath us. The first pod tore through a frigate's underbelly, detonating on contact. The shockwave crippled 3 more ships. Others tried to ascend, only to be pierced by molten shrapnel from below. The Dominion's legendary order dissolved into panic. Inside her command capsule, Lyra watched the explosions through a holographic feed. Target the Pride's communication lattice. Cut their coordination before they stabilize. Confirmed, Jane replied. 2 pods still functional. Launch both. The capsule shuddered as the pods fired upward, slicing through boiling clouds. Lyra could almost hear the ocean screaming, a sound of vengeance older than words. Jane looked at her through the dim red light. Commander, this feels like suicide. Lyra's voice was calm. It is, but it's the kind that makes history. Karatha's bridge filled with smoke and panic. We've lost the primary lattice, an officer shouted. Tactical links failing. Karatha's rage broke through his composure. Restore them. Now. It's not a hack. Another screamed. It's... The Pride of Vraxil convulsed. Fire burst from beneath its command deck. Hull alarms howled. Karath stumbled, claws scraping the deck as explosions rippled through his flagship. He stared at the main viewport and saw a blinding blue glow rising from below. A human vessel, jury-rigged, shielded in molten alloy, clawing upward from the Death World's ocean. Impossible, he whispered. They built a ship. The human cruiser breached the atmosphere like a living comet, molten armor dripping, engines roaring with captured plasma drives. Its hull still bore the scars of human welding and alien circuitry, scrawled with crude words burned into the plating. Remember Thalassa? Lyra stood at the ship's bridge, surrounded by flickering lights and warning alarms. Every system screamed instability. It didn't matter. Lock onto the Pride's ventral core, she ordered. All plasma reserves to the main cannon. Jane hesitated. That'll overload our reactor. Good, she said. Then they'll remember our names. The targeting reticle aligned over the Dominion flagship. Lyra took a deep breath, eyes reflecting the burning stars. Fire. The weapon ignited, a beam of condensed fury punching upward through the clouds. It struck the Pride amidships, tearing through its shields like paper. For a heartbeat, the galaxy itself seemed to pause. Then the flagship shattered, breaking apart in a blossom of blue and gold. Karatha's world turned to light and sound. The bridge collapsed around him. He was thrown to the ground, armor melting. Through the smoke, he saw the human vessel burning beside him, its hull crumbling, yet still climbing, still fighting. His last sight before darkness took him was a figure standing in the flames, small, human, defiant. Inside the human cruiser, the deck tilted violently. Jane pulled himself up, coughing through smoke. Commander, we're done. Reactor's gone critical. Lyra leaned against the shattered viewport. Through the haze, she could see the Dominion ships scattering, retreating. The ocean below glowed red with victory. She smiled, soft and tired. Then it's enough. The reactor core erupted. The ship vanished in a flash brighter than sunrise. Hours later, Dominion recovery teams scanned the orbit. The Pride of Vraxil was gone. Thousands of wrecks drifted through the void. Of the human ship, only fragments remained, glowing, drifting like embers. Karatha's name vanished from their war logs that day. But his defeat did not. Throughout the galaxy, intercepted transmissions replayed the moment a dying human commander destroyed the most feared vessel in Dominion history. Colonies whispered her name. Fleets took courage. The legend spread faster than any empire could censor. On the surface, deep within Thalassa's molten caverns, Jane woke in darkness. The reactor's blast had thrown him into a lower chamber, shielded by the planet's crust. His body ached, but he breathed. He was alive. Above him, the sky burned crimson. He activated his comm, voice hoarse. Commander? Lyra. Only static answered. He sat in silence for a long time, staring at the glowing vents that once housed their foundry. Then he whispered the words carved into the ship's hull. Remember Thalassa. End of Chapter 3. The Inferno, almost equals 900 words. The Dominion called it a containment incident. Every surviving fleet broadcast the same lie. The humans of Thalassa perished in planetary instability. But the truth spread faster than their propaganda. Freighters whispered of a dying human ship that annihilated the pride of Vraxil, the Dominion's undefeated flagship. Mercenaries sang the name Vance in every port. The story grew with each retelling. Humans who built weapons from ocean fire, soldiers who fought in molten seas, a commander who burned the sky itself. And every retelling made the same vow. Humanity is coming back. Months later, far from Dominion space, a hidden station orbited the dead moon of Titan's Reach. Inside its reinforced hull, Jane sat alone, staring at a cracked data slate. Lyra Vance's final transmission replayed in silence, grainy, unstable, but unmistakable. If they call us monsters for surviving, then monsters will become. He closed the slate, jaw tightening. Around him, the hum of machinery echoed through the cavernous hangar. New ships, unfinished, angular, predatory, lined the bay. Humanity's vengeance was no longer a rumor. It was metal. A voice interrupted his thoughts. Still watching that old message. He turned. Captain Rhea Calder, survivor of the Pacifica outpost, leaned against the bulkhead. Her left arm was prosthetic. Dominion plasma had taken the original. The mechanical fingers clicked softly. Jane forced a faint smile. Keeps me focused. She'd hate that, Rhea replied. She didn't die for mourning. She died to remind us we can't stay ghosts. Jane looked past her at the engineers, welding hull plates. The new designs carried no flags, no insignias, just the emblems seared into their armor. A burning world encircled by a single phrase. Remember Thalassa? Far across the void, High Strategos Kareth awoke in darkness. Pain was the first thing he felt. His scales burned, half his body replaced with Dominion cybernetics. The Pride's wreckage had kept him alive just long enough for recovery drones to drag him from orbit. He had survived the impossible, and he hated it. The medical drone hovered near. Your injuries required extensive replacement. You are 80% synthetic. Kareth's voice was ragged, metallic. Then make the remaining 20 strong enough to finish what I started. He limped toward the observation deck, overlooking the Dominion capital skyline, a forest of black spires and drifting warships. High Strategos, a younger officer greeted, bowing low. The Senate expects your report. They demand to know how a primitive world destroyed our fleet. Kareth stared out at the stars. Because we mistook fear for control. The officer frowned. Sir, they fear us, Kareth said quietly. But they understand humanity. That makes them dangerous. They fight not for conquest or glory, but because you've given them a reason to hate. He turned sharply. Mobilize the Predator fleets. Every frontier world must be fortified. The next human war will not be fought in whispers. 6 months later, the first wave of human counterstrikes began. On the Dominion border world of Vraxil Minor, orbital sensors detected unknown contacts. Small, fast, impossible to track. They appeared only long enough to destroy communication satellites, then vanished into the void. Days later, transport convoys started disappearing. Planetary governors demanded answers. None came. In the command chamber of Titan's Reach, Jane watched real-time feeds of the chaos unfold. The map flickered with red Dominion icons, winking out one by one. Rhea grinned. They're starting to notice. Jane's voice was steady. Let them. The more they chase shadows, the easier it gets. She leaned closer. What's next? He pointed to the center of the map, a Dominion core world glowing in red. Kareth's new command post. We're going to finish what she started. The assault began at dawn, if such a thing existed in space. Human stealth cruisers dropped from slip space, directly above Kareth's orbital fortress. Their signatures were disguised as meteor fragments until the instant they opened fire. Plasma bolts rained down, shredding defensive satellites. Kareth's fleet scrambled in chaos. Contact on all vectors, his aide screamed. They're using Dominion transponders. How did they? They learned. Kareth snarled. Return fire. But the humans weren't there to trade blows. Jane's strike group pierced the orbital perimeter, diving straight for the fortress's reactor grid. In the command ship's cockpit, Jane's pulse steadied. "Commander Vance," he whispered to himself. "This one's for you." Rhea's voice cut through comms. 2 minutes to target. Shields at 30. "Hold them," Jane said. "Don't break formation." Their ships moved as one, ragged, battered, unstoppable. The Dominion's capital guns tore through space, but the humans kept closing. When one cruiser broke apart, another filled its place, using debris as cover. The entire formation pushed forward like a single heartbeat. Kareth watched in disbelief as the human fleet descended. "They're throwing themselves into the cannon line. Why don't they retreat?" Because retreat wasn't in their nature. The human flagship pierced the last defensive line. Jane locked eyes on the glowing reactor core. "Rhea," he said softly. "Ignite it." The charge detonated, ripping through the fortress in a storm of light. Kareth was thrown against the wall as the station split apart. Alarms screamed, fires roared, and amid the chaos, he saw the human flagship emerge from the flames, armor blackened but unbroken. Its comm channel opened. A familiar voice echoed, recording. "We don't start wars, Kareth. We finish them." Lyra's final words. Kareth's metallic fingers trembled as the station collapsed around him. The last thing he saw was the burning emblem on the human hull. Remember Thalassa? Then the Dominion's central fortress imploded, taking him and his empire's heart with it. When the smoke cleared, humanity didn't celebrate. They rebuilt, quietly, methodically, across forgotten systems. Veterans of Thalassa founded new colonies, forged new fleets, and swore new oaths. At a small memorial on Titan's Reach, Jane placed Lyra's insignia into a block of polished steel. Rhea stood beside him. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Jane said, "Do you think she'd have wanted this?" Rhea stared at the stars. She wanted them to remember. He nodded. "Then we'll make sure they never forget." Above them, ships passed in silent formation, sleek, dark, and unyielding. The galaxy had changed forever. Humanity had returned not as victims, but as the storm that followed silence. And across every Dominion border, the message burned into intercepted transmissions, repeated again and again. "This is why we are feared.